Hi everyone, I'm WABC Chief Meteorologist Lee Goldberg, and this is Wake Up Weather on ABC7NY and For Weather or Not, sponsored by TD Bank. Well, you know what we're going to discuss, the remnants of Debby. We will be done with this storm, thankfully, as we go into the weekend, but we've got a rough Friday afternoon and night. You know, a good chunk of the day, you might be saying, where's our storm? But you'll notice it by the wind picking up during the day. Might even get a little sunshine out. It's going to get back into the 80s, feel warm and humid, and then things start to hit as we go into the afternoon hours with the peak intensity during the evening hours, and it's a multi-threat storm. So, remnant rain and wind coming in. Let's talk about these impacts when it comes to rain, wind, flooding, and thunderstorms. In terms of the rain, we're not going to match the incredible totals that we saw during the middle of the week. We can get an inch or two of rainfall. I can see how there's some isolated totals that go up to 3, but that's more likely closer to the actual track of the storm in our far north and west suburbs, and certainly in some of the higher terrain, because those southeast winds will be ripping up the higher terrain and rising, and that enhances rainfall. And the brunt of this will head into Friday evening. That's when I think the worst is. If I was looking at some of the timing, I would think that our western suburbs are getting into the thick of it maybe 3, 4 in the afternoon. It doesn't mean it's not showering before then. And the city's probably somewhere in the 5 or 6 p.m. to about 10 or 11 p.m. That window may be centered on 8 or 9 o'clock at night with some of the heaviest. The gusts could go to 50 miles an hour. Now, especially at the coast, but there's a chance for that inland as well. And remember, we're coming off of all that rainfall, so the root systems in the trees, they don't have as much support and stability. We might be knocking down trees and causing some power outages. In terms of the flooding, we'll certainly have areas of flooding and poor drainage, and then we'll have minor to even some localized coastal flooding. We'll talk about the high tide times. And then because of the position we are in with respect to the track of the remnants of Debby being on the eastern side, we had multiple tornado warnings that were in the Carolinas and even tornado watches that were going toward D.C. Thursday and Thursday evening. Well, that threat translates into the tri-state area. So I wouldn't be shocked if we have a tornado watch going through the afternoon and evening hours. The severe risk, and the Storm Prediction Center puts this out, and you can see how that we're in a marginal and a slight area, which actually doesn't sound like a great threat, but that's an elevated threat for severe weather with damaging winds. And again, that isolated tornado threat, yeah, it's a small threat, but it's not zero, and it's even more elevated over extreme western New Jersey and into the Poconos and Catskills, so we'll watch that very closely. Wind advisories are being put up through the area as well from noon Friday to 6 in the morning on Saturday for gusts up to 50 miles an hour. Coastal flooding is a possibility, at least up to 1 foot of inundation in some of our shoreline. That threat is really centered on that high tide cycle. It's probably late Friday night into the very early morning hours of Saturday. I think the high tide that we go through starting midday Friday, the water hasn't built up enough, so I don't think we'll have major problems. We're also not having an astronomically high tide. We just had a new moon this past Sunday, so that shouldn't be enhanced. But in terms of the surf, it'll be building from 6 to 9 feet during the day on Friday. So, you know, you may look out the window and it's getting a little hazy by late morning into the midday. It's like, maybe I can get in some beach time. Well, that's okay if you just want to sit in the beach. It starts to get windy, so sand might be blowing around. And don't try to even, put it in an umbrella. That's going to try to fly away with the winds like this. And then the surf is starting to build, and the rip current risk is very high as well. By the time we get into Friday night, the waves could actually build to about 14 feet, so a dangerous situation. By Friday morning, we're seeing this low that was Debby, and it's at that point a post-tropical low. It's going from a depression to a post-tropical low, and it's west of D.C. So that puts the heart of the heavy rain through central Pennsylvania, a place like State College, into Williamsport, into the central southern tier of New York. So we're on the eastern side of this, and we're just bystanders watching this go by to the west. Once we get into the late morning and midday, I can see how as the low starts to bend towards Scranton in the early afternoon, the edge of some of that heavy rainfall may get into parts of western New Jersey at times and in the Poconos and Catskills, but it would wait until later afternoon to get into the Hudson River Valley and right down into New York City. So that timing, and we'll get a zoomed in view, it's really starting, like I said, late day into those evening hours with the threat of downpours and damaging winds. And again, the coastal flood threat will continue to increase. this is moving along. I mean, by the time we wake up on Saturday, this storm is working through northern New England into Atlantic Canada, and it's pulling all the rain out. So I think at the very worst on Saturday morning, there's some leftover cloudiness, and then we're starting to clear out. So we will bounce back in a hurry. It's just I hope we bounce back with not too many power outages and damage across the area. Let's address the Futurecast. A tropical air mass is just overspreading the area into Friday morning. So instead of that kind of clammy, cool, damp feeling, we go to more of that summery, tropical, humid feel as you head out the door on Friday. And it's already much warmer. Remember, we struggled to stay around 70 on Wednesday and Thursday, some of the coolest highs that we've seen since late May. Well, now it feels like August again. It's very tropical. So by early afternoon, there's not a lot going on in New York City, the nearby northwest suburbs, and on the coastline. There's even some hazy breaks. I'll show you the UV index in a second. You'll be surprised at how high it is given a storm is in the area. So we get into the low 80s, the winds are starting to rip, and we see some of the heavier downpours scraping against the Catskills and westernmost New Jersey, maybe near the Delaware water gap. Again, the upslope of south winds going up the terrain, it just enhances the rising air and can enhance the precipitation. So when I talked about those higher rainfall totals, they would be more likely well north and west. Now we start to get to 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we start to see the overall rain area begin to expand and start to approach the coastline. I think by the time we get to 5 or 6, all bets are off, and we've got some heavy downpours around the area, gusty winds, and that severe weather threat. The heart of that will be through the evening hours. I think the worst is probably east of New York City by 11 or latest midnight. We're still dealing with heavy downpours and gusty winds, Connecticut and Long Island, even a dangerous situation at times with the wind gusts at 50 miles an hour and again that continued threat of an isolated tornado. Suffolk County around midnight still dealing with it, and I think the last of the heavy downpours are moving off the east end of Long Island maybe after 3, 4 in the morning. By daybreak, the only thing you're going to notice that's left of Debby is any damage that's left behind or some standing water or dampness and the leftover clouds in the sky. You sleep until mid or late morning, it'll be basically mostly sunny and starting to get beautiful. You will notice a humid feel in the morning, and then the drier air filters in during the day and the humidity just gradually drops. I wouldn't call it refreshing, but it's so much more comfortable. Sunshine's coming out, and you've got some nice summer weather to enjoy Saturday and beyond. It's actually the first day of a multi-day stretch of great weather. Once again, in terms of rainfall totals, it's not this huge slug of rainfall that, soaks everybody. It's more segments of heavy downpours coming through, thunderstorms. So a lot of us will get in that inch or two category. I can also see some spots that get just half an inch to an inch of rainfall that, are spared from some of these storms or able to dodge them. At the same time, a better chance north and west of achieving those 2 or 3 inch totals. Again, with the saturated ground, our bar for flash flooding is low, so we can see ponding pretty easily, especially in areas of poor drainage. Remember, as always, please don't drive through standing water. Turn around, don't drown. Only take 6 inches of water to stall a car. In terms of the heaviest rainfall, it's along the track of the remnants of Debby. So 3 to 6 inches or more through central and northeastern Pennsylvania, and then into upstate New York, and that could follow the I-87 corridor. So if your getaway tomorrow is taking you up toward the Albany area, up toward the Catskills, up toward Lake George or into the Adirondacks, that is not the route you want to travel during the afternoon hours tomorrow. So if you can't leave early, you have to wait until Saturday till everything clears. There are the rainfall totals. A snapshot of some of the winds. The wind advisory kicks in around midday. The heart of this will be in the afternoon and evening. Even modeling is pushing winds up to about 40 miles an hour. It will likely exceed that with some gusts to 50. And that's just the overall what we call synoptic winds, the winds associated with the weather setup. When you talk about the winds that are available in some of these embedded thunderstorms, you could get severe levels and go 55, 60 miles an hour. The worst of the winds start moving east of New York City in the late evening. It's still rather gusty as we go into late Friday night and early Saturday morning on the east end. By the way, there will still be a breeze coming through on Saturday, but instead of ripping out of the south and southwest, we'll get more of a northwest wind coming in. That's going to dry things out rapidly. It's going to take down the humidity nicely. Talking about that high tide cycle, I think the one that's really late Friday night into the very early morning hours of Saturday, so for instance, Coney Island, 11:52 at night, the Battery a little after midnight, the Sound about 3:30 in the morning or so, a little after that. That's when we can have our biggest flood threat. And maybe it's parts of the Jersey Shore and the South Shore of Long Island that are most at risk with those type of winds. All right, moving beyond this, we get back into really nice seasonable weather weekend and all the way into next week. But it's not extreme heat. If you look at the Climate Prediction Center as we go beyond the 7-day, we're going to be near or even slightly below normal, even though it's nice and warm into next week. We're probably in the low 80s. And there's no signal for really extreme heat as we begin the second half of the month. In fact, there's even a little below normal signal in the mid-Atlantic here. And, is that reacting to some increased tropical threats we might have down the road? I'll be talking about that in just a moment. Looking at the overall steering pattern, you can see why we're not exposed to the heat. It's out west, it's in the south, but we've got a big upper level low circulation in parts of Canada south of Hudson Bay, and that's suppressing the heat. It gives us a nice dry flow out of the northwest. With the trough getting into eastern Canada, there will be some disturbances in the jet stream, some impulses that go through upstate New York and New England. That could kick off a few extra fair weather clouds, maybe even a shower in the higher terrain north, both Sunday afternoon and Monday afternoon, but it shouldn't be a big deal. Most of us should be dry. Now that starts to lift out, but overall we've still got kind of this broad trough or dip in the jet stream and northwest flow into midweek next week. That's going to keep us protected with a nice dry flow out of Canada, so no extreme humidity, comfortably warm temperatures, sunshine. What a beautiful stretch. If you chose this coming week as a vacation week locally, you hit the jackpot. Then as we go into next weekend, here's where things might get interesting. The jet stream looks like it buckles a little bit in the northeast with a big trough over the east, big dip in the jet stream. And notice this little area of circles out here in the Atlantic. Is there an indication some of our modeling that the tropics are going to be getting active? Hurricane Center came out with an update on Thursday saying, just reiterating, we're going for a very, very active hurricane season. Our stance on that has not changed. So I decided to look at our long-range European model, looking for some of the low-level spin. And we're looking for areas of red here on this. And look at what happens once we get into the 13th and 14th. We've got two areas to watch. One that could be over the Caribbean, maybe not far from Puerto Rico. We could have another one way out in the tropical Atlantic. And look how we have to watch very closely, not this weekend, but next weekend. We may have a lot of ducks on the pond here with multiple systems. Hopefully, we've got a jet stream in a protective type position where it would make these storms recurve and go out in the Atlantic. It's way too early to tell. We don't know how these are going to develop, how strong, how quickly. I think just the takeaway needs to be the tropical system the tropical activity is not going away post Debby. We're going to continue to be active even though we have a nice quiet week coming up. Next 10 days in terms of the temperature trend, like I told you, it's warm, but it's below average for the most part. Maybe we get near average, but I'm not seeing any 90-degree days. We've had 20 90-degree days this season. I don't see a repeat. In terms of precipitation, again, an above normal signal on the East Coast. That's because we have some fronts coming through from the northwest, but also the threat of some tropical systems later in the month. But in the short term, after we get past the remnants of Debby on Friday, the rain chances are nice and low and very dependable weather. Get a little bang for your buck and get some car washes because it won't be raining for a while after we get past Friday. 7 in the morning on your Friday, it's 75. It's warmer. It's a lot more humid and tropical feeling. We're mostly cloudy. There are a few showers around, a better chance off to the west. Through the day tomorrow, I do think that the showers will be very intermittent and there'll be hours where it's just dry and even gets brighter, a little hazy sunshine. We get in the lower 80s and then we start to hit these storms later in the day into the evening hours. We have the biggest threat. 81 for a high tomorrow, very humid. AccuWeather alert, but that's really weighted on the second half of the day and tomorrow evening. Clouds and hazy breaks and heavy thunderstorms later on. This is quite a sea and sand forecast. Southeast wind 20 to 25 with higher gusts. Waves building to 6 to 9 feet and the rip current risk very high. Not safe to be in the waters tomorrow. Weather wellness. Well, the air quality has been cleaned out, but the UV index goes back to a high 9, giving you an idea at the very least it'll have a brighter look at times, especially the farther south and east you are. North and west we hang on to more clouds and showers. So the Catskills kind of stormy tomorrow. Saturday and Sunday get absolutely beautiful with lower humidity. Same idea on the Jersey Shore. You won't get your rain until later in the day on Friday, and the worst is Friday evening. Saturday and Sunday look great. In the Hamptons, same idea. You're actually going to have a decent day with the wind picking up, but no real organized shower activity until late in the day or even the evening hours. Saturday, we'll have to get rid of some clouds early, and we'll get partly to mostly sunny, and Sunday looks absolutely beautiful in the upper 70s. Tomorrow night, 71. Heavy showers and thunderstorms, damaging winds, not the time to travel, potential flooding, even an isolated tornado. Your 7-day AccuWeather forecast. One eyesore with the AccuWeather alert on Friday for Debbie's remnant rain and wind. We will dry out later tomorrow night. By Saturday morning, other than some early clouds, it's getting sunny, a nice breeze, the humidity's gradually lowering. Couldn't ask for nicer weather for Dominican Day Parade. 81 degrees and sunny to partly cloudy skies. Could be a stray shower well north. Same idea on Monday, about 80. The low humidity and beautiful temperatures continue into midweek and only increase the sunshine as we go through Wednesday and Thursday. That's the way it's shaping up. You can always get your weather information on ABC7 NY 24/7. We will keep you updated throughout the storm and throughout the weekend and for all the tropical activity to come. Thanks as always for listening to Whether or Not. We'll see you next time, rain or shine.